purposes of our demonstration, although your business is not their business, it'll help if you understand what they do. So I, as a customer, will place an order for a package of binding covers. Very simple. It comes through the configurator, shows up in Acumatica, and I see it. We actually go through and we have a specialized process, a hook that we put into the sales order side that actually analyzes the order and figures out that the finished product is actually going to be a stock item, which sometimes is on the shelves in their company and sometimes not. If it's not, then we realize that we have to take one of their products and value add a manufacturing step to it. So that ends up being a production order, that there's a piece of paper that gets printed out and shows up in their production department that says, do this, make these many, this is what you're going to need to make it, and when it's done, this is where I want you to put it. And it may not be applicable to you, but in some cases, there's a dependency on another item that's actually a manufactured item. And in that case, what we'll do is we'll actually create a sub-assembly manufacturing order that's linked to this, so that we'll work all the way down the manufacturing chain to get down to where we have nothing but raw material and finished goods. Now, that is more than likely not applicable to your operation, but if it is, then I thought I would mention it nonetheless.
It might be.
What we do, as I mentioned, what we do is we inject this triage function. Now, of course, everybody knows what triage, who watch MASH knows what triage is, and that's where we do an analysis on the order as soon as it gets into Acumatica. Matter of fact, we have an automated process that scans this and does this, and it looks at it. It looks at the inventory. It looks at the makeup of the product, its configuration, and it determines if we don't have any inventory and it's something we make, well, then I'm going to have to do a production order for it and get it to the production department. So it creates...
Does that triage, just to interject for a sec, does that triage process start when an order entry customer service person enters the order into Acumatica?
Right. When a customer order goes into Acumatica, I'll just click out to one here. This is what it would, I think this order is representative of what an order would look like right after it either comes in from an automated source, which would be a link to an e-storefront, or after a customer service agent looks at it. So we're looking at an order here, and for a configured product, I can click on this and go out and configure it. So if it's not automated and I'm the person entering it, I go in here. This is obviously very simple, but I have the ability to pick a number of options. There may be colors, there may be different, in your case, knobs, handles, face plates, a number of different things that you select. And when you're done, you do that. Now, what we've done is our hook goes in there. It's normally in Acumatica, when you went under the next action in core Acumatica without this enhancement, would be to create a shipment. But what we do is we say, well, you can't create the shipment until give us a chance to have a real quick look at it with what we call this triage function. And so we'll go out and you can run it manually here if you're entering orders manually, or we have an automated process that at this customer site, we kick it off about every half hour to look at the orders and do that. So if I go in and I triage the order, it goes through, and right now it's looking at the inventory, it's looking at everything I need to do it, and it's coming back and it's saying it's triaged. Now, after it did its analysis on it, it came out and it found out that I needed to actually create a production order in order to fulfill this order. So in this case, I obviously didn't have enough stock on the shelf because it was a custom item that may not have been particularly high turnover, so I don't stock it, and I'm going to have to manufacture it. So I can actually go now and look at the manufacturing or the production order that we created. So here it is here. I'm looking at it here, and it ends up being that what we actually do is the production people don't see it initially at this step. The first thing that production people see is they're actually going to see a printed copy come out of a printer. And it's going to tell them the components that they need, what we want you to do to add value to it. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to punch a certain configuration of holes on the product in order for a particular binding that's going to go with that cover. And when it's done, I'm going to tell you where you want it. So if we go back to when it's done, let me go back to here and I closed my window by mistake. When it's done, you can go back and you can actually enter the real quantities that you consumed if you want. You can, if something happened and I consumed a different number, I could enter it here. However, they want velocity of these operations through their company, because if it takes 10 minutes to add this value to their product, they don't want to spend 10 minutes doing paperwork. So we created what we call a quick complete function. And this quick complete function actually makes the assumption that you use the planned quantities and the planned amount of labor to create this item. And so we can use the planned amount as our costing components to figure out what this ultimately costs. How we do that is doing that within an ERP environment is actually quite a bit of work, because what you have to do is, at the end of the day, we've got raw materials that we're going to consume and finished products that we're going to create, and then finished products that we're ultimately going to pick, pack, and sell. But there's a lot of financial and inventory transactions that happen behind the scenes. Raw materials decremented, finished goods are incremented, money's moved from one inventory account to another inventory account, and depending on how you've got things set up, and it happens. So we didn't want to get into the overhead of writing all of those transactions. So what we did is we actually utilized a function in Acumatica called kit assemblies to do that. So, and what we do is we actually make a production order kind of an overseer of a kit assembly. And the majority of the time, this particular client we're using, they never ever look at the kitting assemblies. We just create that document to do that financial and inventory transaction for us. But I can nevertheless go out and look at that. And the trick that we do is that normally in Acumatica, you cannot create a kit and send it to manufacturing until you have a specification. What we do is we figured out in this environment how to create the kit without having to have a specification. So that's where we've taken a lot of time and effort out of the way that they produce their product, is they don't need these kit specifications. They've got configurable product, and we do these transactions. Now, if I quick complete this particular transaction, it'll go through and it'll complete it. It'll actually go and it will complete the, I wonder if it's finished. Must be finished. No, not yet. Okay. So it's gone through and it's giving me some error here, and it's saying, oh, I don't have enough inventory to complete that. So, which is a good thing. I can't complete something if I don't have enough inventory for it. So what we've done is I'll show you a little later, we've also hooked in to other functionality in Acumatica to not only work on the manufacture and sell side, but to work on the buy and acquisition of your raw material side. I'll show you that in a while. But if I had enough inventory for this, I could quick complete it, and it would go all the way back to my sales order would know that my production order had been completed. And now I would, if I go back through here, I've probably got some other ones in here that'll do that. I think I've got one here. Let me just see where am I going here. I usually set these scripts up so I have a link here. I go to this sales order. No, that's not the screen I'm looking for. If I go to my sales order, however, I don't want to fumble in front of you guys looking for an order and all this, but once that production order is completed, I then can create my shipment. But I can't create my shipment until the production department has told me that they have completed manufacturing what we need for this order.
So and where is that end? So the work order goes out, they build it, and then it comes back. The paper comes back manually, and then what's the process for confirming
the paper doesn't come back manually. As I showed on the production order, they just go into the production order and they just hit quick complete, and then they're done. They move it to the area that they said that they were told to move it to, and here they're moving it to a location called shipping, which is to get the order ready for shipping. And once they do that, they're done. Now, we have another process in Acumatica.
So really quick, Ron, just to put it like in SL, kind of to give you an idea. Basically, as soon as you hit quick complete, that's the same thing as completing the assembly order and running the sales journal. So then it gives you the ability to all of a sudden, now that the order's available and your picking list is ready to go out.
Right. So that could be done in the warehouse in our case, or it could be done by bringing back a signed copy of the work order that it's complete, and Stephanie could do it.
And yes, she hits quick complete, and that's what triggers the shipment to get created and the picking list to happen.
Right. I get it. So I got a couple questions.
Okay.
On the first part, when you create an order, is there a way to select different configurations? In other words, enters a SKU, and there's no inventory for that SKU. Not only is there no inventory, there's 4 or 5 different possible configurations that have to be entered into that SKU. In our case, if you can imagine a door lock, and in the case of Montana Forge, if it's for a standard size door, no configuration change. But if the door is thicker, like 2 1/4 inch or up to 3 inch, a configuration for a thick door kit has to be selected. Or if they want to change a finish on one side of it, or if they want to change a style of rosette on one side, or if they want to change the type of latch or the back set of the latch, any number of different things.
Yes.
Is that something that can be integrated into this?
Yes. The answer is definitely yes. What happens is that's the way you would set your configurator up for that particular series or line of locks. You would this one here is very simplistic. We only have 2 options, but you could have an option here which would be what's the finish, and then over here there would be a drop-down box that you would select what the finish is. And then when you select that finish, it would make a corresponding, enter here the corresponding inventory or non-stock item or painting operation that you have. So by selecting the options, some must be mandatory, like you must have a back plate, but you could then select an optional color for the back plate. Some of the options in the configurator are like that. Now you need a separate demo on the configurator for that, and I'm not the guy to do that for you, but I know how the configurator works. So you can do all that, and ultimately what we get out of the configurator is we get this particular line item and the 2 individual inventory items that we stock or deal with or operations that we're going to perform. We call labor operations quite always in Acumatica non-stock items. So this bottom one I've got selected here is a non-stock labor function, and this is a raw material that I'm going to consume. So in essence, although your product sounds like when you finish configuring it, you may indeed have 10 line items associated with the configured part. You'd have a front plate, you'd have an operation to do on the front plate, you'd have a different back plate, you'd have a operation to stamp a rosette on it, and an operation to put a different finish on it. So yours would be slightly more complicated, but the system will nevertheless handle that. And we would do that, and then it'll go into manufacturing. Now, this particular customer, because they do quite a high volume of orders, and their value-added operation is generally fairly fast to perform, they set this up on an automated basis, that as soon as the production department completes an order, they're done with it. And then they run a process here through one of Acumatica's core functional things, which is to process shipments. Once we have, they have said that all of the associated manufacturing orders with that particular sales order are complete, it will show up in this screen, and we can create it. It will create shipments. Now we can set this up to run on a scheduled basis within Acumatica. For this customer, I think we run it twice on a twice hourly frequency, and so this would go through, create the pick ticket, and the pick ticket would print out at an area in the warehouse where guys run around with carts and they grab a pick ticket and they pick the order, and one of the items on the order, it says, oh, there's a custom manufactured item that's over in the finished production shelf. I'll go and I'll pick that as well for the order. So that's how that particular customer does that. If you have a quality control step or something that you have to do in the middle, you'd of course obviously do your business different that way. One of the things that that we also do is, I also said that on the buy side, what we do is, because we use that kit assembly thing, we actually make it easy for you to make sure that you've got the product. So if we look at Acumatica, Acumatica tracks an awful lot of things about an inventory item. And I'm just moving my cursor here. One of the things you can see is that Acumatica actually tracks kit demand assembly and will consider that when it does its replenishment logic. So you can turn that on or you can turn it off. But in this case, we're saying every day or twice a day, or at what frequency you want, run this routine against all the inventory items that we have out there and find out if I need any material. And if I have material, this might be a material that I would have on a work order. It would see the demand for it. It can look what's on hand. And if I don't have enough on hand, what it will do is this function here, which is called replenishment preparation in Acumatica, uses that logic I showed you and uses those numbers about that item that I showed you. And it shows that I need this material to finish my sales orders, my drop shipments that I'm doing to customers that I may buy from one vendor and have drop shipped to them. And it also, the materials that I need to complete my manufacturing work orders. So it shows me all of that. And then what I would do is I would select an item, and what we do is we select all of them because they want to fulfill all their orders. But I would process it, and then I go to a final screen, which they don't run in a automated process. They run in a manual process, and they look at it here, and they can see everything that the system is telling them it would like them to buy, and they can then at that point select it, and they can aggregate items that all come from one vendor. There's no sense sending 10 POs to one vendor this morning. We'll send one PO with 10 items. This function will actually put all that together and do that.